Capital of Conformity is a new short film that may be of interest to Satanists. I'll talk about the film and how it relates to satanic topics such as Pentagonal Revisionism, and what these technological advancements will mean for Satanists in the future. Also, I'll answer some listener mail about a Satanist view of non-Satanists, and ironically enough, on critiquing commentator podcasts.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. It is the month of October 2023, which of course means Halloween is approaching. I'm sure I'll have much more to say when the holiday approaches. In the meantime, though, let's get straight to the main thing I want to talk about in this episode, and that is a short film titled Capital of Conformity. That is capital Capitol of Conformity. And it is described as a dystopian short film. It's only 2.5 minutes long. You can watch it for free on YouTube from the creator's site. You can think of it almost as a trailer for a film. It has, that kind of feel to it. The creator is Aze Avora. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Azeavora. Aze Avora. Or is it Aze Avora? I don't know. But what is so great about this little film? That is the question. So much that my commentary on it is many times longer than the actual short film itself. Well, the visuals of Capital of Conformity are 100% generated by AI. And like a lot of people, I was originally under the impression that the writing of the story was also generated by AI, since we hear so much these days about AI creating, AI-generated writing these days. But no, apparently Avora wrote the little script, and it seems the AI took it from there. Personally, I think there's something wonderfully blasphemous from just that fact alone. It seems to be this big sacred cow, that art has to be passionately made by humans, and that there's something artificial, something really bad verboten about a machine making art. But, here we are. And that's just one side point I have to all this. That's not actually the real satanic appeal. Admittedly, I'm going to give you sort of a spoiler to this film. So if you have a moment right now, I actually encourage you to pause this episode of Satansplain. And if you have not seen it yet, hop over to the YouTube and look up and watch Capital of Conformity. Then come back here. It's not even 3 minutes long. You don't have to do this, but I think the episode may make a lot more sense if you do. And hey, the spoiler won't be a spoiler if you already know about it. Okay. Whether you did that or not, let's move on. I'm going to read you an article from time.news that's about Capital of Conformity. The article begins, "In an era defined by advancements in technology, a short film called Capital of Conformity has gained attention for its thought-provoking narrative and entirely AI-generated visuals and animation. Created by filmmaker Aze Avora, this dystopian masterpiece challenges viewers to question the price of a seemingly perfect utopia. Set in a futuristic city known as the Capitol, the film showcases a visually stunning paradise where unending joy reigns supreme. The inhabitants of this city enjoy a range of luxuries, including a cosmic carnival that chooses thrilling experiences for them, a bistro offering endless culinary delights, and automatons programmed to be perfect companions. The city even offers a mood-on-the-go device, allowing residents to change their emotions with a simple swipe of their thumb. However, this utopian facade comes with a chilling twist. The narrator warns that accepting these comforts requires sacrificing your own identity. Those who agree to the rules are subjected to constant surveillance. The film masterfully uses AI-generated animations to elicit discomfort in viewers, highlighting the ethical dilemmas associated with such technological advancements. Since its release on August 29, 2023, Capital Conformity has garnered considerable attention, close to 4,000 views. And if I could just interject here, as you can imagine, those view numbers have gone up significantly since then. Viewers were left astonished by the emotionally resonant nature of the film and found it hard to believe that such a creation did not involve human hands. However, it is important to note that while AI tools crafted the visual and audio elements, the scriptwriting and editing were performed by humans. Beyond its artistic appeal, the film serves as a profound warning about the potential dangers that lie within technological progress. It prompts audiences to reflect on the ethical ramifications associated with a society that demands something as significant as personal identity in exchange for an illusion of utopia. In doing so, Capital of Conformity forces us to question the trajectory of our own society and where it might be headed. As AI continues to evolve, enabling regular people to create unique and captivating content, it becomes increasingly crucial to critically examine the ethical implications that arise. Capital of Conformity is a prime example of how even a brief film can deliver a powerful message through AI-generated means, leaving viewers unsettled and prompting them to reassess the price they might unknowingly pay for a seemingly perfect world. End of the article. Here's my take on the film as a Satanist. Some of you may have already heard me summarize this on social media, but I'm going to expand on what I had said. In summary, 3 things. 1, Capital of Conformity screams Pentagonal Revisionism, which is a good thing. 2, unfortunately, as is usually the case when it comes to films of this nature, it does take an anti-satanic U-turn into, well, among other things, a preachy message of, oh no, we can't have it like that. That's too much fun. That's immoral and bad. Humanity and integrity are always more valuable than pleasure, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the fact it's called Capital of Conformity, not Capital of Indulgence, kind of says something. Finally, my summary point to number 3, despite what I just said, I still think many Satanists would enjoy Capital of Conformity for the aesthetics and, of course, the connection to Pentagonal Revisionism. Now, I talked a bit about Pentagonal Revisionism back on episode number 20 of Satansplain. If you're one of the few Satansplain listeners who does not know what that is, you can read all about it on churchofsatan.com or in Anton LaVey's essay compilation book, The Devil's Notebook. In fact, I just bought myself a t-shirt with the 5 points of Pentagonal Revisionism listed on the front. It's a great shirt from Underworld Amusements. Check out underworldamusements.com if you haven't already. Now, out of the 5 points of Pentagonal Revisionism, there are 2 relevant points here. Total environments and the production of artificial human companions. I've run into some people who are new to Satanism, and they find the Church of Satan suggested film list, and they don't understand why the film list does not include movies like The Exorcist, but it does include movies like Westworld and Blade Runner. Well, I can answer that quite simply. You see, the movie The Exorcist has nothing to do with Satanism. The Exorcist is about demonic possession, and demonic possession is a Christian superstition, not a belief that we have in Satanism. Whereas Pentagonal Revisionism is something we do have in Satanism. Now, it's fine if you're a Satanist who happens to like The Exorcist. There's nothing wrong with that. If you like it, you like it. And, there are some Satanists who like Jesus Christ Superstar. But I shouldn't have to explain why, that's not on the Church of Satan suggested film list either. But to briefly reiterate some of what I mentioned in episode 20, Satanism is, of course, a religion that puts the individual above the collective. It's also not a religion for the masses, not a religion for everybody. Our goals are not going to be trying to get a satanic Bible in the nightstand drawer of every hotel room or copycatting similar things Christians do in public, like erecting monuments and having Sunday school. And Satanism is also not a religion out to save humanity. Yet, having said all of that, it is still possible to take this philosophy of Satanism and visualize it on a larger scale. Insofar as asking ourselves questions like, okay, what are some satanic concepts which we can expand on? What are some things that would make the world a more satanically enjoyable place, even if not everybody's going to become a Satanist? What would happen if we take this concept we find in Satanism and this other concept and carry it out as far as it can go? What's next? What's the logical conclusion? What are some things that may even cause a paradigm shift in the world in a satanic direction? So back around 1988, during the Satanic Panic, we were getting really sick of explaining what Satanism is not about, what Satanists are not doing, not asking for. That we're not killing babies, we're not sacrificing animals, blah, blah, blah. So finally, the Church of Satan said, okay, fine. Here are some things we would like to see manifested. Thus, we got the 5 points of Pentagonal Revisionism, 2 of which are, like I said, total environments and artificial human companions. I run into conspiracy theorists now and then who say, oh, look at how AI is showing up more and more, and pornography too. Look how graphic and available pornography is these days. And people are going to use virtual reality goggles to spend time in these fantasy worlds. It's satanic. And as a Satanist, I have to say, why, yes, it is quite satanic, now that you mention it. Just not for the reasons that you think, not for reasons you can comprehend. In fact, if there are any Alex Jones fans listening in right now, listening to me, a Satanist, to find out what the enemy is doing, well, there's a quote you can stroke yourself off to now. You heard a Satanist say that these things, like, porn and virtual reality and AI, that they're satanic, and it's literally spelled out in an official Satanist plan called Pentagonal Revisionism. And congratulations, by the way, because you just used internet technology to indulge your fantasy. I'm confirming your bias. You had a fantasy that you would find Satanists saying these things to confirm your worst fears. And so I'm giving you a dopamine buzz by confirming your suspicion that Satanists have been explicitly calling for things like AI for the past 35 years. You're welcome. Aha, you just did what you were afraid of everybody else doing. Anyway. But seriously, this is where Alex Jones and InfoWars and people like that always lose me. And what frustrates me about people like that is not that they get so much wrong, but they get a lot of stuff that I think is correct and worthy of investigation. But the problem is they needlessly attach these foil hat fantasies to their arguments and connect dots that aren't really connected. So I'll see like Alex Jones say, like, look, here's footage of an event where children are putting dollar bills in the G-strings of drag queens. And I say, yes, that is shocking and disgusting, Alex. I am in agreement with you. As a Satanist, I reject the sexualization of children like that. And then Alex Jones says, look, here's an invasion going on at our country's southern border. I say, yes, Alex, that is bad. That is horrifying. I saw the video too. I agree. We need to do something about it. Or he'll say, like, look how corporations are being forced to comply with these ideas coming out of the World Economics Forum. And I say, yes, that's bullshit. And I'm a capitalist. I'm against it. We need to investigate that. But then then this is where the U-turn happens. He says, and the reason for all of this is because the world is run by the globalist elite Illuminati Satanists who are socially engineering the elimination of the nuclear family in the name of Satan. And I have to say, you lost me there, Alex. But hey, maybe this is all just satanic statement number 9 in action. Satan being the best friend the media has ever had. In this case, the new church. Anyway, I'll talk more about that in the second half of the show, about, commentators I disagree with and where they lose me. let's get back to Capital of Conformity. We have this beautiful world of indulgence in this movie, and then we're told, no, there's a huge price to pay for this. And we see this with other, fictional things too. Like in the movie Westworld with Yul Brynner, we have this beautiful fantasy world come to life. And then we're told, no, this looks beautiful and indulgent, but it's really a nightmare. It's wrong when humans try to play God. Now, again, it doesn't necessarily ruin the whole movie for me. I still love Capital of Conformity. I still love Westworld. And some might argue, like, well, you have to introduce some danger and tension or else you don't get much of a story. Yeah, okay, true. But I think it's possible to do that in some other way without, doing it in an anti-satanic way. I thought the movie AI did a great job. Regardless, as a Satanist, I do find it interesting that non-Satanists, in the end, often feel this need to take things, take like a moral high ground in these movies. It's almost like confession for feeling bad that they like all these indulgent things. This idea of, no, you can't have too much of a good thing. That's when problems arise. Now, is there any merit at all to these arguments? Well, as a Satanist, first of all, I reject the underlying idea that indulgence is inherently bad. I reject that idea. We say it right in Satanic Statement number 1. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. As a Satanist, I don't find anything glorious or admirable about abstinence, about, people who deny themselves pleasure for the sake of denying themselves pleasure. And I certainly don't care for people who get all self-righteous and in my face if, I'm enjoying something. I post a photo of myself eating chips or a candy bar or something, and there's always some person who chimes in with, oh, sugar is bad for you, and that has this artificial ingredient, and that soda has blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, fuck you. I'm going to eat this piece of cake anyway. And sometimes they turn up the self-righteous factor. Oh, well, good luck. You're going to get diabetes. No, I'm not going to get diabetes from eating one fucking piece of cake. Like, dude, piss off. Let me enjoy this little indulgence. We've seen that meme. Let people have their nice things. Now, is too much cake bad? Is too much junk food in general bad if you eat too much of it? Yeah, duh. Like everybody knows that already. We don't eat cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because, well, several reasons. I know my mouth would reach a point of sensory overload. Maybe I'd feel a sugar crash later. I'd feel bloated, feel malnourished. So in other words, binging like that would not be pleasurable. In the end, it's not an indulgence to eat too much like that. It is indulgence having, the occasional one piece of cake. Now, the article I read earlier said that Capital of Conformity was a warning against the potential dangers of technological progress. That's what it said. Quote, it prompts audiences to reflect on the ethical ramifications associated with a society that demands something as significant as personal identity in exchange for an illusion of utopia. Well, satanically speaking, I don't think giving up personal identity would be a thing I'm in favor of, because the god of Satanism is the self. Though it's also not quite clear to me what they really mean in the movie, within the context of the story, what giving up your identity means. Like, for example, in the little movie, there are machines which can allow you to relive past memories. Well, then I have to ask, okay, can you get rid of yourself and still enjoy that? Because if you're reliving past memories, well, that is yourself and your identity. You wouldn't be able to call on indulgences that are uniquely tailored to you if there was no you. If you get what I'm saying. But regarding the fear and dangers of technological progress, as they put it, this theme is nothing new. And I'm not just talking about other movies, like sci-fi movies that, play up on this fear of technological progress, dystopians, the stuff. I mean, just the fear in general. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when people in the 1990s were giving warnings about this thing called the internet. And all of these studies supposedly showed links between internet use and depression, and antisocial behavior and insomnia and whatever. In fact, I'm old enough to remember a decade before that, in the 1980s, like the early 1980s actually, there was a concern about addiction to video games, where they changing these players into helpless zombies and enforcing ideas like violence. Yes, there were people back in the day who really feared that smashing barrels in Donkey Kong was subliminally developing a violent mindset. Was any of that true? Well, almost every person I know has played a video game or sent an email in their lives, and hardly all of them are in straitjackets as a result. And before somebody tells me, no, we're not talking about Donkey Kong, Bill. This stuff is really bad now. Okay, but that's what they always say too. They always say, no, it's really bad now. So, yeah, that's why I'm skeptical. Forgetfulness of past orthodoxies. Remember that. Nevertheless, it does seem that with technology, we get more and more opportunities for indulgence and fantasy, and also the technology to intensify those pleasures like never before, whether it's new developments in virtual reality or new ways to engineer food or something else. Technology also seems to make real human to human interaction less and less required, whether it's through automated telesystems or AI-generated story writing and art production, or the fact you can look up something on a website rather than call somebody, and so on. So here are some questions. As Satanists, do we see any potential dangers to all of this? If this is the trajectory of where technology is going, are there any special ways which Satanists should best navigate this? Well, one idea that comes to mind is that if this is the way technology may be going, then maybe there's some great lucrative opportunities on being a provider of some of these services. I know there are Satanists who are doing this already, whether that's doing professional work in the fields of AI or virtual reality or the food industry. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Whether if you think it's an enslaving thing, well, maybe be on the other end of that. You might come out ahead. But what about Satanist as the consumer of these technological advances? The consumer. So to answer this, let's look back at the basics of Satanism. We want indulgence over abstinence. The Satanic Bible makes a big distinction between indulgence and compulsion. As LaVey summed up in another essay, indulgence can be controlled, whereas compulsion controls. Also, as Satanists, we are our own gods. We are masters of our own lives, so we don't condone compulsive behavior. We are also against self-deceit, one of the 9 satanic sins. A total environment is self-deceit with awareness, which is fine because that's not true self-deceit, as we say. But I would argue that maybe too many short-term fixes of pleasure may not be indulgences in the end, but possibly misused as self-deceit. Impulsive behaviors trying to distract yourself from something else. Which brings me to another one of the 9 satanic sins, and that is lack of perspective. Comedian Dennis Leary, I remember, said that happiness comes in small doses, folks. It's a chocolate chip cookie or a cigarette or a 5-second orgasm. And, his argument that people say, I want to be happy, that happiness is not some kind of definitive attained thing that you get. And I would agree that, short-term immediate indulgences are the spice of life. I will not shame people for that. I will, however, say that the spice does not constitute the whole meal, necessarily. I know it's cliche to ask things like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? But it's a good thing to ask yourself now and then. Think of indulgence and self-gratification on the long term, just not the short term. So, some other things to ask yourself as a Satanist. What are some of those other things you've been wanting to do in life? What would really enrich your life? What would feel like an indulgence in the long term? Do you like where you're living now? Would you like to live in a bigger house? Maybe you're renting. You'd like to own your own house and have that freedom of full ownership, decoration of it. Do you like the car you're driving? Do you like what you're doing for a living? I'm not talking about status of whether these things look good to other people, like you need a better car to look more impressive. No. What is it that you want? Again, something to ask yourself once in a while. And getting back to this idea of, distractions and all that, I would be lying if I said I never procrastinate or find myself falling into the zone of distraction, if you will. I love that we're living in an age where I can pull out my little companion known as my smartphone and look up anything about anything, play a game, watch a movie, listen to a song that just popped in my head. But I like long-term rewards too, not just immediate rewards. Sometimes you gotta get a schedule book, write down your long-term goals, make a plan for them. And that's not abstinence. Again, that's not abstinence. Long-term indulgence is what I call it. Think about that. These are all just things I suggest thinking about as Satanists as we master the technologies of pleasure in the 21st century. So on that note, let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan, marking the beginning of the Age of Fire and Year 1 Anno Satanas. In 1969, he published the Satanic Bible, codifying Satanism as a religion, the first time it's been done in human history.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of hell, come forth from the pit, bestow the blessings of hell upon us. For we are your children, and we invoke thee this night.
In 2001, I was appointed High Priest of the Church of Satan. In 2007, I published the Satanic Scriptures, further defining and expanding on Satanic philosophy and greater magic ritual.
Hail, Satan full of might! Hail, Satan full of might! Our allegiance is with thee! Our allegiance is with thee! Cursed are they! Cursed are they! The God adorers! The God adorers! And cursed are the worshippers! And cursed are the worshippers! Of the Nazarene eunuch! Of the Nazarene eunuch!
For the past 50 years, the Church of Satan has stood as the sole organization to define and defend Satanism as a religion. And though pretenders to the infernal throne have come and gone, we have stood the test of time and will into the future. Visit churchofsatan.com for more information and read the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Scriptures. Knowledge is the solution for ignorance. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan! Hail, Satan!
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Episodes of Satansplain are available from a variety of sources. You can listen on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other places as well, including right on the official website, Satansplain.com. Also check out the channels for Satansplain on YouTube, Facebook, and X. I almost called it Twitter, but they want you to call it X now. Not that people are really going to stop calling it Twitter. But anyway, please give a like and a follow where applicable. Speaking of podcasts, I will be making another appearance later this month on Reaper's Underground. Not talking this time about straight up Satanism 101 like we did the first time, or humorous takes at Twitter trolls like we did the second time. Those are both fun. I had fun doing that, but now we're going to talk about something completely different, so it should be fun as well. Let's get back to Satansplain. Let's get into some listener mail. I'm going to read you some listener mail. In fact, let's start with a satanic anecdote. That means it's time for a satanic dote. Cue the satanic dote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanic dotes.
This satanic dote comes from Jesse. Jesse says, like many others, I'm a longtime listener of the podcast. My satanic dote is as follows. On Friday, I was at a theme park with my family and dealing with stomach cramps from a sports drink that did not agree with me. As we were lining up to go on a ride, we accidentally got the line number mixed up, which you would think would be an easy fix. However, this man that was behind us took it upon himself to call out my wife with a projection that she must not understand English. He blatantly said this in front of our 6-year-old daughter, as well as everyone around within an earshot. While I was ready to fly off the handle and potentially injure this person, I realized that by doing so, it would have not benefited myself or my family in any way, and it would have caused way more trouble than it was worth. I mean, that's true. You could get kicked out of the park for doing something like that. Unfortunately for him, he had to sit right next to me on the ride, where I remained dead silent. By the time the ride was ending and circling back to the platform, I whipped out my Church of Satan membership card and made sure he saw it unobstructed. Then I proceeded to state the opening line of the invocation to Satan, which, once the lap bars were raised, I looked at him dead in the eye and said, "Enjoy your curse." I don't think I've ever seen anyone flee as fast as this guy did, and I can only imagine moving forward that this is a moment in which he will never forget. Aside from the entertainment value I got, the cramps also fled from my body just as fast as that guy did. I'm glad that I was able to blow off some steam through pragmatic means, which is what over 2 decades of consistent studying of Satanism has provided me. Hail Satan, Jesse. Well, thank you, Jesse, for that satanic dote. And another email here I have is from Celestia. Celestia says, I have recently come into contact with the Church of Satan due to my fiancé, whom you have had correspondence with before. I should preface this email by stating that I myself am a Catholic, though I have zero issue with my fiancé's beliefs, and we often have long discussions where I agree strongly with nearly all the beliefs of Satanism. We recently, as of writing this, performed a compassion ritual in which I cried. I was informed that this was a good thing, and have been gleefully planning a satanic wedding. I have, though, wondered about the church's opinion on people such as myself, who by no means have any issue with referring to the Lord Jesus as the Nazarene eunuch and hailing Satan during ritual. My question is, does the church accept people such as myself where they are happy and comfortable with Christianity? Would I be welcome to attend rituals and discuss articles such as a redhead named Peggy? That's one of the articles you can find on churchsatan.com. I hold a slight concern that other Satanists might assume I am at odds with the church's beliefs due to my Catholic background. Okay, so my response. First of all, we have a number of members who happen to be married to non-Satanists. And for all of you Satanists listening, I'm sure you have, even if not a spouse, have had some friend or family member who is not a Satanist. Maybe they're a Catholic, maybe they're something else, and overall, we don't really care what these other people believe in, at least not as an organization. As long as you're not telling lies about Satanism or pushing your religion onto Satanists or other people who don't want to have anything to do with it, we typically don't care that you're a Catholic or anything else. If that works for you, then we'd much rather see you stick to that rather than try to force yourself to be a Satanist if Satanism isn't a fit for you. And I'm talking about, again, our interaction with non-Satanists in the real world. The question was, would we accept you? Well, we accept the fact that you practice something different than us, but we don't collectively accept you to the Church of Satan, I would say. We don't collectively accept people into a flock because we're not a flock. There may be individual Satanists, again, who like you as a person, and there may be some individual Satanists who don't. Whether if somebody chooses you know, to accept you into their personal circle of friends, well, that's up to the individual if we're talking about acceptance in that sense. As for the question of would you be able to attend rituals, well, likewise, that is entirely up to the individual Satanists who are conducting the ritual you're talking about. And that discretion applies even if you weren't a Catholic, even if you were a Satanist yourself. I mean, I myself, as a Church of Satan member, as a magister of the Church of Satan, I don't have the right to an invitation to just any member's ritual that I want. I can't just walk in to the home or the yard of a fellow Church of Satan member and say, well, you know, you have to let me in because I'm a magister. No. It doesn't work like that. And Celestia's other question was, would you be able to discuss Satanism articles with other Satanists? Well, yeah, sure. You want to talk to Satanists, that's up to you. I mean, you emailed me, I'm a Satanist. We're conversing, sort of. You may see other Satanists online, though, who aren't necessarily open to questions from strangers. They're not obligated to answer them. So again, it's up to the individual Satanist. I do have to wonder, though, if you have no problem doing these satanic rituals and all this stuff, then what is it that is keeping you held on to the label, the identity of Catholic? What investment in that do you still have? That part just seems strange to me. This next person who wrote to me has asked that I don't use his real name, so I will leave that out and just get to his letter. He writes, thank you for producing a stellar podcast. I discovered Satansplain a couple months ago and have listened to almost every episode now. As far as I know, yours is the best podcast about Satanism, and I appreciate the work you put into it. Because my wife and I are school teachers and have an infant son, we have very little free time. Your podcast has helped make chores and mundane tasks much more enjoyable. Thank you. Well, thank you for the praise. And he goes on to say, I wondered if you were aware of a fascinating playlist I found on Spotify featuring songs that Anton LaVey supposedly enjoyed. And he gives a link here to a Spotify playlist. I know you are interested in music from this era, primarily the 1940s, and figured that if you weren't already aware of the playlist, you might enjoy it. It has become standard listening at our house these days. If you are familiar with the playlist, I wonder if you could tell me how you got it, how it got on Spotify, and if it is at all endorsed by the Church of Satan. Well, first of all, I am not particularly interested in 1940s music. I don't know where you heard that, where you heard I was. I don't dislike it, but I would say I'm really more into music from the 1910s, a generation before that. Now, as for this playlist, I'm personally not a Spotify user. I know that may seem strange to people who listen to Satansplain on Spotify, and I'm grateful that there are people who do, but I myself just don't use Spotify. I'm not a Spotify listener. I think I do, however, know which music playlist is being talked about here. Back in 1990, when we published the book called Church of Satan by Magistra Templi Rex, Blanche Barton, there was an appendix in the back of that book, and it listed various pre-rock and roll songs about the devil and other sorts of dark themes. And the point of including that was to show that this sort of thing hardly began with heavy metal. As people were always saying during the 1980s satanic panic hysteria that, satanic music is synonymous with heavy metal, and if you listen to too much heavy metal, you get into Satanism, blah, blah, blah. So this was to show that in reality, there's a wealth of Satan-inspired tunes out there, which you've probably never heard, and which predate rock and roll, let alone heavy metal. So we've reprinted that list in We Are Satanists, the book that's the re-release and greatly expanded re-release of Church of Satan. But anyway, several years ago, somebody took that list, the music list, and apparently looked up the individual song titles and threw together a Spotify playlist based on it. Unfortunately, this is a criticism I have. Unfortunately, if I recall correctly, that playlist seemed pretty hastily done. And what I mean is the particular versions of some of the songs in the list were, in some cases, much later renditions of those songs, which were heavily jazzed up and sensationalized. And that's fine if you still like it, but from what I've read about Anton LaVey, those later big band sorts of versions of the older songs made LaVey cringe. Like, he wasn't a fan of that thing. I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're not much of a jazz fan or a classical fan, those genres of music are not usually a case of where you have a song and the original recording artist, and that's who's known as always doing it. There are jazz standards, songs that have become popular, and maybe the composer wrote it, and maybe there were some versions of it that were particularly popular, but otherwise, get covered, for lack of a better term, tons and tons of times. But speaking of the original song list itself, I have to say that some years well before Spotify, I myself got to host an episode of Lambert's Basement on Radio Free Satan, where I shared examples of recordings of songs from the same list. Maybe I can talk Radio Free Satan into having that available again. We'll see. And finally, this anonymous reader also asks, I wonder if you have any thoughts on the Georges Montalba mystery. I know Magistrate Barton has written about it, but I'd like to hear your take on the controversy. Well, I have nothing to add to what Magistrate Barton already wrote in that very thorough article of hers, which you can find on churchofsatan.com. So, I don't really have anything to add. Well, actually, I guess I have two things to add. Fuck Toby Dammit and fuck Xena Shrek. Next letter. This next letter is from Aaron. Aaron writes, I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, episode number 2025 with Dave Smith. I agreed with most of the things they were saying. On the one hand, it's frustrating to hear all the ways in which we are being lied to, but on the other hand, it's nice to feel validated for being skeptical in the first place. That's why I like the Joe Rogan Experience. Towards the end of this podcast, however, Rogan starts going down a rabbit hole about someone whom a previous guest had mentioned. This person was Jack Parsons, quote, a key figure in the early development of rocket propulsion, who was also associated with the, quote, Ordo Templi Orientis and Aleister Crowley's religious movement. They bring up a news article of which there are many associating Parsons with Satanism, to which Rogan repeats over and over different bits of misinformation about Satanism. This is not the first time I've heard Satanism misrepresented on his show. The last one I recall was Duncan Trussell, who I normally enjoy for his surrealist concepts, talking about conversations he had with friends who are Satanists, supposedly, and making it sound like they were devil worshippers. My point is, it's disturbing when I've spent 2 hours nodding in agreement with all these points they're making, and then watching them do zero research and perpetuate misinformation about something I'm knowledgeable of. I get that they are very busy guys who don't have time to research every single thing they say, but where does that line end? I guess my question is, have you experienced things like that where a source you typically trust gets something so wrong? Does that make you question everything they say? So, great letter. Thank you for writing. To answer this question, in short, yes, I do experience this sort of thing all the time. There are a lot of political commentators that I listen to, and I'll be listening to one of them, thinking they're really making some excellent points and teaching me something new, but then they'll say something that completely loses me, and maybe even something I completely disgustingly disagree with. For example, I like a lot of right-leaning and conservative commentators. In some cases, they're just branded as right-wing because they criticize the left-wing, or they're just not left-wing enough in people's eyes, or just simply not left-wing. They're center, but center people look like far right-wing to people on the far left, vice versa. But I take no shame in what I like to listen to. I take no shame in the fact that I'm pretty right-leaning politically on a lot of topics. I love the Rubin Report with Dave Rubin. That's a show I love. I love Razor Fist. He's probably my favorite commentator. Carlin Borisenko, of course. I was even a guest on her show. Glenn Beck. I like Glenn Beck. I like Ben Shapiro. Black Conservative Perspective, Liberal Hive Mind, Scott Adams. But as for the ones who are actual conservatives, for example, like they always lose me once they talk religion. And like the most recent example was I was listening to the Rubin Report. Now, the Rubin Report is commentary from Dave Rubin, who is not right-wing. He honestly is not, even though he gets branded as that. He's gay and pro-choice, for starters. So I'm watching the Rubin Report, and I thought it was going great, up until the point where Dave Rubin starts making the argument that if you don't believe in a higher power, you're bound to replace that with something else, namely the state, and be a statist and maybe a communist. And it's just such a bogus argument, because you can be an atheist and still be a flag-waving patriot. You can be an atheist and still like capitalism. You can be an atheist and still want small government and all these other political points he agrees with. What's crazier is that I know he knows this. I know that Dave Rubin used to be an atheist just a couple of years ago, so he knows this already, that just not believing in a deity doesn't mean you're somehow a huge risk of becoming, a statist or falling into a cult or blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that was like the most recent example. But yeah, religion is where they typically lose me. Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire, there's a conservative, and I actually agree with him on a lot of the things he says on a variety of topics. I think he typically articulates his arguments well, and reasons, that he has the positions that he has. I think he's funny as hell. He's intentionally funny. He has this really dry sense of humor where I swear he could be a stand-up comedian if he wanted to. And once again, though, he loses me when he gets religious, which last I checked is not actually all that often, especially compared to some of the other his fellow co-workers at the Daily Wire. He is one of the only Christian conservatives who said something fundamentally correct about Satanism, and this is where I will give him credit. Matt Walsh has said on multiple occasions that Satanism is the worship of the self, and that is correct. Where he misses the boat is he then equates that to the solipsistic, delusional mindset of political extremists who demand special attention and special rights and expect the world to conform to their feelings. So he says, well, that's self-worship. No, it's not. Now, on a side note, I'm obviously not saying that you can't be both a Satanist and politically left. We certainly have Satanists who are politically left in the Church of Satan. As I've mentioned several times before, in fact, we have Satanists in the Church of Satan from all over the political spectrum. I did a whole episode on that. And to sum it up quickly, Satanists go with whatever politics they feel are in their own shamelessly selfish best interest. But given that Satanists are different people with, they are different economically, geographically, age-wise, and so on. There's all that variation among Satanists. So it's inevitable that not all Satanists are going to vote the same way. But anyway, my point here is that Matt Walsh is wrong in calling the self-entitled solipsistic protester mentality the same as satanic self-worship. As I said last month in a Dr. Shit's meme, there's a difference between I-theism and clinical narcissism. I-theism is saying, I am my own God. I-theism, I am my own God. Narcissism is thinking you are everyone else's God. Getting back to the topic of commentators and where they lose me, there are likewise some moderate or left-leaning commentators I like, but, again, they lose me when they talk about something else, not religion, but, they maybe I'm in agreement with them on there and, the atrocities of Christianity and all that. But then they lose me when they talk about, say, pacifism and peace and love, hippy-dippy stuff. Or I'll be watching an atheist show and they derail the topic to bitch and moan about the Second Amendment. Or they want socialism or some other stuff that, frankly, repulses me just as much as the Jesus stuff does. So getting back to the question, do these sorts of things make me skeptical about everything else they may be saying? Do I suddenly stop listening? I would say no. If they're providing a good argument about those other things, I don't think they're necessarily being insincere, because it's entirely possible to be completely on board and rational with these 3 or 4 things and then ignorant of this 5th thing. So I accept the fact that I'm not going to agree with every commentator I listen to. Is it frustrating? I think was one of the questions asked in the email. Oh yeah, it's frustrating. It's like when your favorite band puts out a terrible album. Or the album is great except for that one song, this one track. There's like 10 awesome tracks, and this 11th track that's just horrible. Sometimes you give it another chance and it grows on you, and other times, no matter how much you want to like it, it's like you can't. Now, is there a point where I draw the line? Yeah, on certain things. Like, for example, if you tell me that Satanism shouldn't be covered by the First Amendment, if you're a commentator who says that, we're done. I heard that from Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire and Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA, and I unsubscribed from each of them when I heard them say that. Knowles, last I checked, is like getting more and more like Pat Robertson. But, there are other people I've stopped listening to when the thing that annoyed me just got more and more frequent in what they talked about. Like when an atheist show spends every episode whining about Donald Trump. It's like, yeah, I get it. You don't like him, and you're entitled to have that opinion, but I don't need to hear this every fucking episode. That's not why I'm listening to your show. I'm tuning in for something else. So that's my summary, my answer to that. There are commentators I listen to, and they'll say something that I think comes out of left field, and they're completely wrong, but it's not always a reason for throwing away everything else that they say. And I think it's inevitable that if you listen to somebody, you're going to find things that you disagree with. And that's fine for listeners of this show. You may not happen to agree with every single point I make or every single thing I have to say, but hopefully the rest of what you hear has a good, solid argument behind it. I'd like to back up what I say. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all, though, for listening to my show, Satansplain. I think we'll end things here for today. Until next time, hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2023, Magister Bill M.